You wake first to a sound that is almost a whisper. Sleet making a thin metallic patter on the curved panes of the lantern room. A steady, patient percussion that sets the pace for everything that follows. Outside, the sea is a distant breath and a scrape, a low, indifferent motion. Inside, the lighthouse holds its small, stubborn warmth. The lamp hums, a muffled, steady tide of light and machinery, soft enough to be part of the background but present enough to be a companion. Lily moves through the room with practiced care, fingers knowing where every ridge of the wooden table begins and ends. The mug that never chips quite the same way. The kettle whose note she can tell from half a room away. You may dim your screen now, if you'd prefer the company of sound without sight. Let the dark make room for the rain and the low, cyclical thrum of the lamp. If evenings like these feel like a kindly hand on the shoulder, and you would like more, there's a playlist of similar nights waiting quietly below. For now, stay with this one. The invitation is soft and optional, offered like the tilt of a teapot spout. There if you want it, unobtrusive if you don't. Lily stands by the stove for a moment, breathing in the faint, warm tang of boiling water and preserved lemon. The kettle sings and settles, a shy little whimper under the larger soundscape, and she turns to fetch 2 cups, one for herself, one for whoever comes first. Her hands are small but steady. The skin at the knuckles is a map of winters and stitches, a testament to patching canvas and mending nets and coaxing wick to life. Around her, the room is arranged with the kind of deliberate simplicity that makes for calm. A woolen throw folded over the back of a chair, a shallow tray with a spoon, a jar of honey with the lid slightly askew, a stack of cloths folded so the edges line up like quiet sentences. The lantern room is higher than the common space below. The panes curve around like a circle of held breath, and the storm draws its lines upon them. Each splinter of sleet makes a sound that is close to being musical. Tink, rasp, a satin scratch, and Lily listens as she pours tea. Steam rises in a column that gathers and lifts, then blurs and softens against the glass. She carries the tea to the window seat and settles into its dip, pulling the throw about her knees. The lamp beyond the glass throws a constant golden arc. The sea reflects it in smudged, slow strokes. A heater hums low beneath the bench, its warmth steady and uncomplicated. The kind of heat that does not announce itself but fills the pockets of the room like an agreed-upon secret. Making tea is a small ritual observed through an unhurried series of gestures. The spoon measures, the leaves unfurl, the tea breathes for a count of silence, and then is decanted. Lily watches the kettle's small, glad quiver, and someone else's hands, familiar, arriving, are heralded by the creak of the ladder and the thud of boots on the gallery just below. The sound of visitors carries differently here. People arrive with their noise softened, as though the walls themselves ask for gentleness. The door opens and the air shifts, carrying in peat smoke, the faint iron tang of the sea, and the smell of somebody who wears a scarf like armor against cold. Seamus steps in with the easy, unhurried rhythm of someone who has been doing a walk for a long time. His voice comes with him, low and warm, a rumble like settled gravel. "Morning, Lily," he says, and the words are a slow, present thing that sits between them like a small, warmed stone. He shakes the sleet from his coat and sets his cap on the peg. The cap has seen winters and has become something like a companion. Seamus moves to the table and leaves a parcel wrapped in oiled cloth, a strip of cured cheese and a piece of bannock, something to be shared. He takes his cup and blows thoughtfully on the tea, steadying himself with that simple ritual before speaking of anything else. He is careful with his words and generous with his attention, which is the same thing here. The lighthouse needs hands that hold steady, but it also takes those who can listen for the intervals between waves. Rose arrives shortly after, her coat dusted with the sort of salt that indicates tending rather than travel. She carries, tucked under one arm, a shallow box of seed trays and a small brass tin with spares for the lamp. Replacement wicks, clean glass washers, a length of spare wick thread. Her hands are always busy, even when they are idle. Knuckles stained with green from the window boxes she keeps below the gallery. Nails trimmed and silvered with salt. She sets the box on the bench and opens it with a care that is almost ceremonial, arranging the trays like a small garden on the table. Her voice is soft as a well-worn story. She speaks of the littlest things, a sprout that tilted toward a sliver of dawn, a sieve she mended the day before, and the room brightens in those small accumulations. Mara and Joss come in together, as twins often do, the quieter twin catching the footfall of the other, and both bringing the lighter notes of the day. The rustle of paper, laughter low and shard-like, a pocket full of bits and strings that they have been saving for a project. Their hands are quick and young. They set down a bundle of sea-glass prisms they have polished with a rag, and a coil of ribbon in colors that look strange against the muted interior, as though someone has threaded tiny pieces of shoreline into the warm gloom. The children's presence changes the rhythm. Faster, yes, but never urgent. They move from corner to corner with that small business eagerness that fills a place with quiet industry. Fingers busy, conversation a steady undercurrent. The soundscape holds them all. Sleets patter, the lamps hum, cups against saucers, the kettles sigh. Each small noise is allowed its space. The story of the day is told in measures of tea poured, in the folding of cloth, in the soft scraping of a needle through canvas. Lily brings out a shallow tray of oatcakes, warm from a small griddle. She hands one to Seamus and then to Rose, and to the twins who tear theirs in half and offer her their crumbs. The food is plain and honest, and it settles into their hands easily, as though it is part of what keeps them stitched to each other. There is comfort in the repetition of simple motions, the stirring of a spoon, the careful retying of a leather strap on a tool, the way a brass button is threaded and threaded again until it sits secure. Lily's movements have the unhurried precision of someone used to making small things last. She presses a fingertip to a seam now and then without thinking, checking the sound of the wall as one might check a heartbeat, feeling for tiny betrayals. It is how one notices that which will not announce itself until it speaks in louder terms. Today, her fingertip finds something different. A fine, pale line in the glass, traced like a hair's shadow along the curve of the lantern pane. The crack is small, almost polite. It does not split the world, only the glass's surface for a few inches, like a seam where cold air might one day find purchase. Lily's breath catches for a moment, not from fear, but out of a form of reverence, the recognition that even the smallest fracture asks for attention. She traces it with a cloth, making no noise that would alarm the others, and the sleet continues to play its soft percussion as though unheeding of human concerns. For a moment she is very still, the way someone is when they listen for a sound between two other sounds. The fissure carries more meaning than its size. In her mind it becomes a small test of attentiveness, a reminder that things are mended in time and by hands that will sit with them. Seamus notices the pause and looks up, his eyes following the habit of long acquaintance. He reads a change before it is explained. He does not ask with alarm, he asks with a calmness that invites company. "Found something," he says, and pours more tea without hurry, offering it across the table like a small, steadying presence. "It's only a hair," Lily answers. "A line. I'll keep an eye on it." The words are a decision as much as a sentence. There is a practical tilt to them. She will do the repair later when the sea is kinder and the light steadier, when they have more hands and the afternoon's work has quieted into something like a plan. She prefers to do repairs with others. The act of mending becomes communal when it is done with company. For now, she chooses tea. Mending is, in this house, a ceremony. It begins with material and ends with something new to be read as a marker of care. A patched seam, a rewired lamp, a strip of leather sewn with slow, even stitches. The thought of the fisher will sit at the edge of the day like a pebble in the pocket, noticeable by touch but not likely to impede the walk. This small postponement is deliberate, not denial. There is a wisdom to it. Tasks done with haste are often undone. Tasks performed with company are kept as part of a shared memory. Seamus nods, understanding more than he needs to, and they let the small worry unfurl into conversation about other small things. Rose produces, without fuss, a length of thin brass wire and a roll of adhesive-backed film from her brass tin. Small instruments of practical repair she keeps always, like a midwife keeps thimbles. "We can fashion a backing," she says, and her voice is as much an offering as the things she puts upon the table. The twins, overhearing, sit straighter, eyes brightening at the prospect of a project. Not of crisis, but of craft. Mara pulls out a spool of waxed thread from her pocket. Joss finds a pair of blunt little scissors and a folded scrap of leather. Each item is an honest answer to an honest problem. For a while, they let themselves be ordinary, folding cloths, buttering more oat cakes, swapping stories in whispers. Seamus talks of a storm years ago that blew in a night so blunt the waves seemed to forget themselves and curl into themselves before striking the rocks. He tells it like a tale told to explain why a door should always be latched, why a lantern must be checked. The twins listen, half dozing, as though his story is a lullaby woven from rope and wind. Rose hums a little tune as she sorts the seed trays, a tune that sounds like the turning of pages or the measured motion of knitting needles. Lily watches them all, and in the watching makes a map of what is needed. Thread, leather, a small brass button to hold the cover in place, perhaps a few of the twins' polished prisms to hang as a modest curtain against spray. The idea pleases her. Repair, she knows, need not be purely functional. It can be beautiful, and in beauty there is a fierce, quiet sort of defiance against the harshness outside. They begin to talk, tentatively at first, about how to approach the crack. It is practical talk. What sort of backing would best hold? How to secure without putting new stress on the curve? But threaded through it is a warmth, a pleasure in making something together. The repairs they imagine are as much about ritual as function. Lily suggests a backing of oilcloth, dyed dark to catch the lamp's glow. Rose proposes the brass wire and film. Seamus offers his steady hands for finishing work. The twins insist on hanging a few prisms, declaring that a little scatter of light might make the severest weather look like a celebration from the inside. There is laughter at the word celebration. The laugh of people who know how small pleasures keep large things in perspective. And It is the sort of sound that turns the room inward, makes the hum and patter feel like a blanket rather than a wall. As they plan, Lily moves to collect what will be needed. She opens a drawer where she keeps tools labeled by habit, not by formality. A thimble that has seen more stitches than fingers, a length of waxed thread in a color that is almost the same as the lantern's light, a tiny file for smoothing brass. When she handles the objects, she treats them with the same affection she gives to her kettle and her chair. There is reverence in practicality. Each tool is familiar. The weight of the needle in her hand, the slight groan of a well-used awl, the sharp bite of a small blade. She lays them out on the table in a deliberate line, so that their shapes read as a slow, silent sentence. While they arrange, the storm continues its patient work upon the glass. From time to time, a sleet flake glances and makes a sound like a bird's wing against metal. The twins hold up prisms to the window and marvel at the way the lamp's beam pools and refracts within them. Lily watches the light break and be reassembled into tiny, rotating rainbows that glide lazily along the curved pane. It is a soft, private magic, the sort of thing that makes you forgive 1,000 less tender things. The conversation drifts toward ordinary confessions, which is to say, the kind of stories that make the room feel more like a home than a workplace. Rose says that her window boxes are sending up a sprig of something she cannot name. Seamus admits he mislaid his pipe for a fortnight and found it in the porch, behind a boot he had not worn since last winter. The twins argue about who polished which prism. These small admissions sit well in the room. They are the stitches that keep a community's fabric from fraying. Lily finds herself smiling, the fissure in the lantern room softened by company. There is a slow choreography to the way they move now. Someone fetches a lamp to better inspect the crack, another brings a plate of oatcakes, someone lays down a length of oilcloth on the bench to act as a surface for work. Lily washes the film with a soft cloth, the motion repeated until the glass sings slightly under the rag. The act of making the workspace tidy is part of the ritual. In cleaning, they prepare their minds for focused attention. The twins set a small wooden sand timer on the table, an old piece with glass that requires turning, and agree, with a childish solemnity, that they will allow themselves 2 runs of it for talk before beginning the first stitches. The sand timer's grain falls like a measured tide. Even time here seems to prefer a gentle rhythm. The planning turns naturally into the gathering of materials. Seamus reaches for a coil of thin leather strip and tests the flex of it between his calloused fingers, approving with a small nod. Rose trims the brass wire's tail with a careful hand, wrapping the cut end in a scrap of cloth so it will not bite. Lily threads the needle, the waxed thread catching and sliding with a soft, tactile permission when she presses it between her lips to hold the line steady. Each action is slow and deliberate. None are rushed. Their hands speak to each other in a language older than words. At some point in this gentle preparation, a minor, practical quarrel breaks out about how best to sew in a way that will not create stress across the glass. Joss suggests evenly spaced stitches. Mara recommends a tighter stitch for fear of water. They debate like people who have been through enough weather to know the worth of a good seam. With care, with attention, with the humor that keeps them from taking everything too seriously. Lily listens and weighs both suggestions with the kind of patience that has let her keep a lamp lit through more than one long, dark night. As they settle to begin, Lily feels the familiar wash of contentment that comes from shared labor. Repairing is a way of knowing people. To hold the same object and make it whole constructs more than a fixed pane. It constructs trust. She tampers the glass gently with the pad of her finger, as if to reassure it, and the patter of sleet answers in a small, private applause. The twins begin to thread prisms onto a thin cord for the decorative fringe. Rose takes a piece of film and smooths it like a second skin over the inside of the pane. Seamus measures distances with slow, exact breaths, and marks with a soft pencil where the leather should sit. They talk quietly as hands work. The conversation is not large, no news to unsettle the room, but it holds stories and small confidences that make the air feel cordoned in with trust. Lily tells of a night years ago when the lamp flickered, and a gull found its way to the gallery, and they had coaxed it back to the open sky together. Rose mentions how she once stitched a child's mitten from an old sail, and how that mitten kept the child's hand warm all winter. Each anecdote is a small hymn to the practical kindness that defines their lives here. There are sounds to accompany the work that are more than just noise. They are textures. The needle makes a soft, rhythmic click against the oilcloth. The thread whispers. The leather gives a small, contented groan as it is bent and eased into place. The sand timer runs down once and is turned over again, its tiny grains a measure of patience. Lily hums a little under her breath. A tune with no name, only the quality of turning a page. And others take it up in half-phrases that fit snugly together like tiles. The hum becomes a refrain, a tiny chorus that signals comfort and continuity, and it returns at points throughout the work like a bell rung softly. As the first pieces of the backing are affixed, they find a rhythm. Rose holds the film taut, while Lily steadies the leather. Seamus makes small, precise stitches where the leather meets the frame. The twins thread prisms and try them against the light to see how they scatter it. The decision to make the repair partly decorative is not frivolous. It is an active refusal to let the outside be merely a threat. They are making a patch that will catch the storm and return it in a kinder shape. The lamps now do more than keep the dark at bay. They become instruments of small wonder, their light refracted into a quiet abundance. At some point, as the first seam takes form, they pause to taste the tea again, to agree on where the next stitch ought to lie. Seamus straightens, reaches for the tape measure, and makes a soft, corrective motion with his hand. If we lay the backing a fraction wider, he says, we'll keep the seam from catching. The words are simple and wise. He has learned the economy of words that move things forward. Lily nods and eases the leather wider. The stitch holds, and the glass seems to breathe a tiny, almost inaudible sigh. Outside, the storm continues without drama. The sleet shifts in intensity and becomes a kind of punctuation for their conversation. A soft swell when the wind turns, a tiny staccato when a gust plays at the curve of the panes. The lamp hums on like a slow tide, and the heater's breath warms the soles of their feet. They work in the quiet confidence that things can be mended, yet the crack remains visible, modest, and persistent. It sits like a question on the glass, and though it is being addressed, it is not yet answered. The first measures of repair have been laid down, and already the pane shows evidence of care. The film's sheen softens the line. The leather provides a suggestion of reinforcement. The prisms at the edge catch stray motes of light and scatter them into delicate slips of color that move like small fish against the curved glass. The effect is homey, a domestic festival turned inward. Lily finds in that small act of communal mending a quieter revelation, that the very existence of a fissure had become a reason for gathering. If the crack had not been there, perhaps the afternoon would have been a different sort of gentle. Still warm, perhaps, but lacking the particular intimacy that comes when hands join for a specific purpose. Repairs give people an excuse to sit close and to speak in low voices. They give children a simple, honest task, and elders a place to offer the steadying weight of experience. As the light fades a little, stormlight is never simple dusk. It drapes the world in a cold, blue patience. The room grows snugger. They turn the lamp slightly, angling its beam to catch the newly affixed prisms. For a moment, the lantern spaces become an interior aurora, and the tiny reflections travel across their faces in a manner that suggests celebration rather than triumph. They do not sing loudly. Instead, they hum the same tune that marked their work earlier, and the sound sits with the sleet like two companions agreeing on a path. When at last they pause, not from a sense of completion, but from a natural quiet, Lily finds herself grateful for the small company. She leaves the needle on the bench for a moment and pours a fresh cup of tea, offering it to Seamus, who accepts with a customary, unassuming nod. The twins, cheeks pink from the narrowness of the gallery air, count the prisms they have strung and decide, with the solemnity of children concluding a rite, to hang one more. The lamp in the lantern room throws its light across the repaired seam and then beyond, the beam steady as a spoken promise rather than a promise of anything more than presence. There is no grand declaration. There is only the settled sense that something has been attended to, that a small act of care has been performed and is now part of the place's memory. The crack is still there in part, no miracle of complete erasure, but it has been transformed into a line wrapped in thoughtful hands and a few bright pieces of glass. They begin to tidy slowly. Tools are collected and returned to their drawers. Scraps are rolled into a neat pile to be used another day. The sand timer is turned once more for the twins to gauge the remainder of the afternoon. Someone fetches a thick blanket and drapes it over the back of a chair. Someone else wipes the table with a cloth until the grain of the wood shows like a small, soft map. Even as they straighten and arrange, there is a delicate attention to the smallness that makes life here manageable. The latch is checked, the wicks are trimmed. Rose tends the wick of the spare lamp with practiced fingers, twisting and pinching until the flame would then draw evenly if lit. Seamus secures the brass button in place with a pair of pliers and checks the pressure of the leather strap once more. Lily stands by the window and, with a fingertip, traces the still visible seam, acknowledging the work done and the work yet to come. The day moves towards evening without hurry. Outside, the storm does not relent, but it becomes less a thing that threatens and more a pattern that frames their small world. The sound of sleet on glass becomes a low, consistent consolation. The lamp hums on, as it has for years. Lily notes with a small inward satisfaction that even the smallest fissure, when treated with care, yields a kind of quiet glory. It becomes, in their hands, a reminder that fragility can be held without alarm. They settle into a gentle after-work ease. Tea refilled, a final oat cake shared, the twins reclining with their prisms lined up like small soldiers of craft. Conversation loosens into memory. Seamus recounts a time when the lamp's seal failed, and they had to work through the night to keep the light steady. Stories told not to alarm, but to mark how small, persistent actions add up to a life that keeps others safe. There is a tenderness in these exchanges that feels more like habit than art, as natural and necessary as a hearth's glow. Lily pulls the blanket a little closer as the room cools in its outer ring, thinking of the work yet to be completed. The seam will need a final set of stitches to be truly secure. The brass wire may need to be adjusted after a day of testing. The prisms might be rearranged to better scatter the light. These are small cares, but they are the sort of small cares that make a life. For now, though, she allows herself to dwell in the quiet after, a space that is part relief, part satisfaction, part the soft aftertaste of having been useful and loved. As evening inches nearer, the group moves naturally toward winding down. The twins fold up their ribbon and pack their tools into a small satchel to take home, promising to return tomorrow to check the seam and to add a tiny knot where the leather meets the frame. Seamus gathers his parcel and tucks it into his coat. Rose carefully places the remaining seed trays into her box and secures the tin with the lamp spares. Lily wipes the table, smoothing the grooves where the breadcrumbs had gathered, and sets the needle aside with an economy of motion that says she will return to it soon. Before they go, there is a small work of ritual that marks the day's conclusion. Lily reaches for the sand timer, turns it, and suggests, half in jest, half in habit, that they allow it to run while they make one more slow cup of tea, and marvel at the way the prisms catch the light. The others agree, sitting back into their chairs as if settling into the last scene of a day without drama, content with a gentle repetition. They drink. The lamp continues to hum. The sleet continues its patient score on the curved panes. The seam, for now, is quiet and cushioned by leather and film, and the promise of a few more stitches. Lily feels a contentment that is not loud. It is the kind of contentment that might be a small, steady ember rather than a blaze. And yet, though the first measures of repair are in place and the room has folded around them like an old coat, there remains a sense, a slight, attentive edge, that more will be needed soon. The weather, they know, can change its mind. Tomorrow's tide may test what today's care provided. They speak of this in low tones, not as concern, but as future appointment. A morning meeting to finish the stitching, perhaps a spare strip of brass to be brought from Rose's stash, a careful test run of the lamp at dawn. The plan is not urgent, only practical, the sort of quiet organization that keeps a lighthouse working. For the moment, they let the evening be what it has been, a day folded into small acts, a problem acknowledged and tended, a community that bears its burdens in shared hands. Lily watches the prisms sway faintly in the lamp's reflection and feels the satisfying pull of completion braided with the patient expectation of further work. The hush of this in-between time holds them like a soft, indispensable thing. They finish their tea. Seamus rises and, with a final, steadied smile, throws his coat over his shoulders. Rose tucks a strip of spare wick into her box as though laying down a bookmark for the morrow. The twins collect their tools, their hands lingering on the table for a moment, as if to impress the memory of the day into the wood's grain. Lily straightens the blanket and checks the latch once more, moving like someone who knows the value of small certainties. As they leave, the lighting shifts a touch. The lamp's reflection travels farther across the pane, and the repaired seam holds its place, modest and practical. Lily stands for a long breath, feeling both the weight and the lightness of what they have done. She crosses to the window, presses her forehead briefly to the warm glass, and watches the storm draw its slow lines. The sound of sleet is a steady metronome, and she listens to it as to a familiar friend. Night has not yet settled fully. The storm continues, and with it the low, constant music of rain on curved glass. There is still work to be done, plans to be made, but there is also a large allowance for rest. Lily turns from the window and moves toward the small inner room where she keeps the clock and a box of letters. The house breathes around her, full of the small traces of the afternoon. A smear of flour on the counter, a thread left from the last stitch, a prism glowing softly in the lantern's beam. She pauses in the doorway and looks back at the lantern room, the people who have gone, and the work they have begun. The seam will be finished tomorrow. The prisms will be rearranged. The lamp will be tested at dawn. For now, there is a permission to slow, an acceptance of the day's measure. And Lily allows herself to stay in that slow place a moment longer, tasting the remainder of the tea that sits cooling on the table, listening to the sleet as it taps its small, certain verdict on the glass. The light in the lantern hums on, and the repaired seam, modest and earnest, holds the story of a day that began with a whisper and became a shared, quiet labor. Outside, wind and sea convene the long work of weather. Inside, a small community has made its reply. You may dim your screen now, turning sight aside so that only sound surrounds you. The sleet, the lamp's hum, the soft murmur of hands at work. If that is how you prefer to travel into the evening, they have not finished. The patch is secure for the night, but tomorrow will bring the test of tide and time. For now, as the light pools and refracts through the prisms they have strung, the room leans into its quiet, and Lily moves to close the circle of the day, gathering the remnants of work and tending the small things that will carry them forward. Lily lingers a moment in the doorway, allowing the hush to settle like a hand over a book. The lantern room behind her keeps its steady, golden breath. The repaired edge rests in soft confidence beneath the film and leather, and the prisms toss small, lazy flickers around the curve as if practicing a celebration. She crosses the inner threshold and moves into a narrower space where a chest of odds and letters sits beneath a low shelf. The room smells faintly of lemon rind and oilcloth, of pages turned half a dozen times, and of that very particular warmth that comes from a lamp kept well. She picks up one of the letters, fingers tracing the fold out of habit rather than need, then sets it aside. Tonight, it is enough to notice the paper's grain, the ink's slant, the way the past presses gently into the present. She makes a small supper. Nothing elaborate, only a pot of barley risotto warmed with dried herbs, a piece of smoked fish taken from Seamus's parcel, and another cup of tea. More for the ritual than for hunger. The movements are unremarkable and therefore restorative. The spoon circles the pot, steam lifts and curls against the ceiling. A cloth is folded with exactness. She eats facing the window so she can watch the glass take the storm's texture, page by page, and the prisms make their quiet show. The soundscape of sleet and hum forms a steady backdrop. Even the simplest chew seems to find its own rhythm within that score. By lantern light, Lily writes a short note to tack to the workbench. A list of things for morning. A spare strip of leather, the waxed thread in a darker tone, a small pot of adhesive sealed again. She writes with a slow hand, as if to allow the pen's movement to carry thought into plan. The note is practical and kind. No rush. Tomorrow we finish. Check the outer seal at dawn. She folds it and pins it where she will find it first. Sleep comes by degrees in the lighthouse. Lily tucks the blanket further around her knees, dims the lamp in the inner room to a warm, low gleam that will not compete with the lantern above, and lets the day settle like spent embers. Sometimes she reads a line or two from a book kept for such evenings. Tonight, she hums the tune that threaded the day, a soft, wordless phrase that has no beginning and seems content to be picked up and released. The lamp hums. The sleet patters. She thinks of the seam, and then deliberately thinks of something small and bright. A child's mitten, found mended and unexpectedly warm. The thought is like tucking a corner of the world under a neat fold. The night's hours are not dramatic here. There are no sudden alarms, no urgent knocks. Where the world beyond the gallery breathes its cold and finds purchase on the panes, inside the house the breath is measured and even. Lily lights a small night lamp at the bedside, not out of need, but for company. Light as friend. And sets the sand timer beside it, a token of the small rituals the day has contained. She lets the last of the tea cool until it is easy to sip, and carries the cup to the window, where she rests it on the sill and watches the seam hold its own in the lamp's glow. Before she allows sleep proper to gather her, she circles the lantern room once more. Hands check the latch, the spare wick is stowed, the brass button is admired for its neatness. She gives the clasp a gentle pull, as if to ensure the work of the day has been understood and accepted. The little patch of leather and film looks purposeful rather than fragile, and Lily feels the kind of quiet satisfaction that arrives when small labor has been performed for the right reasons. She says nothing aloud. Her contentment is private, shared only with the hum, the light, and the sleet. When she finally rests, the house keeps a soft, watchful murmur. Outside, the storm writes its long hand across the world. Inside, breaths slow and the room folds into sleep. The night is not emptied of noise, but the noises are companionable. A low squeak as the heater settles, a far gull's call softened and translated by distance. The patient, metallic tapping of sleet on the lantern panes that could be mistaken, in a softer world, for applause. Lily's last conscious thought is the plan for the morning. Finish the seam. Test the lamp at first light. See what the tide has to say. And then she allows herself to drift, feeling the steady presence of other hands in the memory of the day. Dawn arrives in a gray, careful way. Light is a thin thing, folded into the horizon, and the storm, though unchanged, shifts its voice from the thick percussion of the night to a more intimate, finer patter. Lily wakes before full light, as she has been taught by years of keeping watch. She moves with a practiced economy, dressing in layers against the chill and making herself a small, brisk pot of tea to take up to the lantern. The kettle's note seems brighter in the heart quiet of morning. She holds the cup cupped in both hands, feeling the warmth travel from palms to chest, an internal seam of comfort. On the gallery above, the repaired seam looks different in morning's pallid cool. The film's sheen catches the lamp's beam into a thin, steady glow. The leather takes on a matte dignity. Lily runs a fingertip along the leather's edge, half to test, half to reassure. It is secure enough for the present, but there is no complacency in her touch. There is only the facing of work with materials and measure. She makes a short list, then climbs the ladder to the common room where she expects her neighbors. By the time the others arrive, the house has shaken itself awake. Seamus comes in with the solidness that morning gives him. Cap pressed down, a tartan scarf wound once about his neck. The parcel he brought last night now reduced to a neat wrapping. Rose follows with a box of seedlings, damp and eager. The twins appear like a brisk breeze, cheeks bright and hands tucked into pockets for warmth. Their small satchel of tools hangs at Joss's elbow, a jumbled and trusty collection. They assemble around the table, no need for announcement, and begin the later work with the same gentle economy they have practiced. Lily kettles water again, and offers cups around before any tool is touched. The ritual of tea is not mere ceremony here. It is a way of meeting the day with steadiness. They sip in companionable silence for a few minutes, the hum and patter outside furnishing a soft lace of sound. The sand timer is set aside on the bench as today's small gauge, a token of the hours to come, and the twins watch its grains fall as if taking stock. They begin with inspection. The film's edge is smoothed, any trapped dust removed with a careful cloth. The leather is stroked, the brass wire's ends tucked and bound. Rose unseals a pot of a thick, tacky adhesive, old stock kept for exactly such occasions, and dips a small bone spatula into it, applying a thin bead where leather meets glass. Her motions are practiced. She knows the temperament of adhesives and the right amount of patience they require. Seamus takes a measuring tape and doubles his checks, preferring exactness to expedience. The twins knot a new length of cord for the prisms, and practice threading the tiny loops as if repeating a pledge. The morning is slow, as all good mornings in the Lighthouse are meant to be. They work in long sweeps of concentration, and then loosen with talk. Conversations flit from small practicalities, the exact weave of the waxed thread, whether the leather should be oiled before laying, to quieter recollections. A Sunday, when the sea lay down and the sky was so clear, starlight seemed to rattle on the rocks, a lamp that once dimmed, and how they coaxed it back. These vignettes are worn into the group like comfortable chairs. They do not interrupt the labor but settle into it, reinforcing the sense of continuity. The twins have a small, earnest debate about the placement of the prisms. Mara argues for spacing them evenly along the upper arc, so they will catch the light and form a steady garland. Joss prefers a cluster at the corner where the beam first meets the curve to create a dense scatter of color. They test both arrangements carefully, holding the prisms to the lantern's beam and noting the pattern the light makes on the leather. Lily watches them with a fondness that is almost a kind of devotion. The attentiveness of youth applied to a humble object is itself a kind of small prophecy. They stitch. The work moves at a measured tempo. Lily's hands anchor the leather as Seamus threads the needle and draws waxed thread through with a slow pull. The needle makes small, considerate passages, each stitch setting a rhythm. Sometimes they pause to rub their fingers together, to align a corner, to measure with a practiced eye. Each pause is its own kind of punctuation. It allows the ambient sounds to breathe and the mind to settle before the next careful motion. Part of the charm of this morning's labor is in the unneeded luxuries they allow themselves. Rose produces, from a corner of her box, a small pot of preserved lemon rind steeped in oil, a gift for the finishing touch. And the twins secretly tuck a sliver into Lily's cup as a nudge of zest. Seamus offers a slice of bannock warmed on the small griddle, the edges held for communal taste tests between stitches. These flourishes are not indulgent. They are the small kindnesses that make the work sweet rather than merely useful. At one point they all fall into a near silence, a deep focus shared among people who have worked before, and trust that the other's hands will find the measure as needed. The sand timer is turned and turned again. The twins' humming returns, a familiar refrain that threads between the click of needle and the rustle of leather. It is a tune made of half-phrases, simple notes that are easy to keep, like the memory of a map that directs where to place a stitch. The sound meshes with the sleet and hum in such a way that it feels as if the whole house is breathing in unison. Slowly, the seam takes on its final form. The leather edge is sewn down with deliberate redundancy. The film beneath is smoothed to remove any wavering air pockets. The brass wire is eased into place and anchored discreetly. The twins finish stringing the prisms, tie a knot that is small and secure, and then offer their finished fringe to Lily with grave pride. She tests the edge, presses along it with an approving nod, and finally says the small phrase that seals such moments. That will do. They do not dance with triumph. Celebration here is a quiet thing. Seamus rises, and, with the gentleness of habit, pours from a small tin of nutmeg into the bannock batter, adding warmth to the morning. The group shares the hot bannock and the tea, and the lamp's beam, now unobstructed and well secured, throws a different kind of light across the curve. The beam seems cleaner, more purposeful, and the prisms refracted into an assortment of diminutive colors that dart across faces like shy birds. For the twins, the final act is to hang the prisms in their agreed pattern. They lift the cord over the inner rail and, together, find points of balance. As the thread fastens, a new quality arrives to the room, a playful scattering of light that moves with the lamp's rotation. A small private aurora that shifts across the wooden table and the bowls of tea. They step back, hands at their sides, satisfied not with a sense of conquest, but with the peace that follows sustained attention. There is a ceremony of sorts, modest and heartfelt. Rose brings forward a small tin of caramelized apple slices she prepared earlier, the scent of cooking fruit rising like a blessing. Seamus hums the refrain, and the little group repeats the phrase with him, a simple harmonic that forms more than a tune. It forms a pattern of belonging. They take a moment to acknowledge the day's work, each offering one small phrase. A thanks for hands, a note of how the seam might hold, a light joke about who had the dustiest fingers. These shards of speech knit the morning into a memory. Lily is touched in a way that asks only to be quieted by gratitude. She looks at each of them, the twins' bright, earnest faces, Seamus's calm solidity, Rose's gentle practicality, and she says nothing long. A small, sincere smile is enough. Their shared labor has transformed a simple fissure into an object that tells a story, of attention, of craft, of company. The seam will endure because it has been invested with the habit of care. They tidy once more, but without rush. Tools are wiped and stowed. Scraps become a neat bundle for future work. The sand timer is set aside as a memento of time's gentle passage. The lamp is tested at a low pulse, and then again at full draw, its beam held steady. Lily watches the light travel along the newly reinforced edge and feels, without melodrama, as if a small debt has been repaid. The twins' prisms spin a touch as they catch the gold, and it is an image that will sit corned and comforting in her memory. In mid-afternoon, the weather softens its tone. The sleet thins into a finer watery line, and the gusts lose some of their earlier insistence. Outside, gulls wheel with less frantic beating of wings. The sea's voice calms. Lily stands at the window and, for a long time, simply watches the light move across the water. It is the kind of vigil that has no conclusion, only continuity. The sea, the weather, the lamp, each an element in a slow, mutual folding. Visitors come and go over the next hours, each bringing the smallness of their own days to the house. An old neighbor arrives with a ball of yarn for Rose, A fisherman leaves a jar of cured anchovies as a gesture of thanks. A young couple from the cove, out for shelter, drop by to warm hands and offer stories of a buoy they saw adrift. Each arrival is greeted with the same calm ritual: a cup of tea, a slice of bannock, the offer of a chair and a corner of warmth. The lantern room, now mended, takes these small attentions without notice, absorbing them into its quiet archive. Toward evening, Lily prepares a modest ritual of thanks. It is not public fanfare, but a steady act. She fills the kettle, boils it, and then, after a careful measure of breath, adds a spoonful of tea leaves to an earthen pot. She steps into the lantern room, and, with a reverence that is ordinary and precise, pours the hot water over the leaves, letting their scent rise and mingle with the lamp's oil and metal tang. The smell is green and warming, and as it spreads through the curved glass it seems to hold everything together like a seam of scent. They gather close by the window as dusk threads its thin light. Someone produces a small battered harmonica and passes it to Seamus, who hums a low, measured line. Rose picks up a wooden spoon and taps it lightly on the bowl to keep time. The twins hum in unison, and soon enough the melody is the old refrain, gentle and enough. There is no pretense here of performance. It is simply the sharing of sound that has been part of their day. The prisms scatter the light into small motes, and the group watches these points of brightness move like minnows across the pane. After this short music, there is a modest feast. Nothing extravagant: braised fish warmed with lemon, the last of the bannock toasted, a pot of stewed pears, laid out on the table as an offering shared between hands that have labored together. They eat slowly and speak in the low, present way that characterizes their fellowship. Not to fill time, but to mark it. Stories are told in small circles. Seamus speaks of a lamp lens that once cracked, yet still held its light long enough for a ship to change course. Rose recalls a seed that sprouted in a crack of mortar, and, against all sense, held on for spring. The twins recount their part in the scene with proud brevity. Lily listens and stores the narratives as one collects shells, not for their ornament, but for the evidence of having been somewhere. As night approaches, the group begins to disperse. Hugs are brief and precise. Words of return are given with the solidity of promises. The twins wave, promising to be back tomorrow at first light. Seamus nods and steps into the night with a parcel slung over his shoulder. Rose tucks the last of the seeds into her box and, with a small, confidential smile, slips a note into Lily's hand about a new sprig she will try in her boxes. The house settles into a comfortable afterglow. Lily walks the rooms, making small checks. The kettle emptied, the tools clean, the lamp secure. There is one final ritual before she allows the house to finish its sleeping. She moves to the lantern room, draws the curtains that protect the inner glass, and then takes the small leather key to the lamp's fuel cap, turning it just enough to feel the threads align. The action is precise, practiced, not a show for anyone but the lamp itself. She stands and listens. Outside, the sleet has become a whisper. Inside, everything hums with the satisfaction of a day done well. She allows herself a small, private smile. Now follows the evening's last minutes of voice. The narrator re-enters your ear, a soft presence that leans into the hush. You may dim your screen now if you wish. Allow the world to be composed of sound alone. The sleet, the lamp's hum, the distant, patient breath of the sea. If the full darkness suits you tonight, turn the light away. If you prefer a single low glow, settle it to your side and let the audio keep you company. The choice is yours, given without pressure and with care. Lily moves to the window seat and tucks the throw around her once more. A final cup of tea is made and shared with the house, not with others now, but with the place itself. She runs her fingers along the now familiar seam and imagines the morning's tasks already waiting, like bookmarks placed between the pages of a well-thumbed book. She allows herself to be buoyed by the day's small successes. She also holds the reasonable knowledge that work is not finished, but is, in its own good time, continuous. The lamp hums, the prisms scatter, and a soft motif circulates through the room, the refrain that has kept time for them. A few low notes hummed by Seamus and taken up in half-phrases by the others, a line without words that is easy to remember and gentles quickly into the night. It surfaces now in Lily's throat as she hums along beneath her breath, a final benediction that is not religious in the grand sense, but is an acknowledgment of the human and practical spoils of a day spent with others. She arranges her small things for the night, the needle placed in the thimble, the spare leather folded and tied, the prism cord draped so it will not tangle overnight. The sand timer makes one last quiet cycle as the twins promised, its grains settling in a small, patient heap. The kettle breathes a last sigh as it cools. Outside, the sea lays its hand soft on the shore. The house draws in and exhales the slow warmth of well-managed work. Before sleep, Lily opens the small wooden chest where she stores letters and keepsakes. She finds, tucked into a folded scrap of canvas, a tiny stitched square. The first stitch she learned to make, in a time when her hands were less sure. She touches it and smiles, remembering the fingers that taught her and the lamp that burned while the house learned to be a home. She sets the square on the table and looks at it a moment, the object a small symbol of how practice and patience can change the shape of things. There is no great speech, no formal closing. Instead, a small joint breath is taken, a look to check the latch, a soft knot tied in the twins' satchel, a final smoothing of the bench. Lily blows out the inner lamp, leaving only the lantern's steady glow to knit the curve together. The house is prepared for the night. Tomorrow's light will test what this day's care has made. She turns her face to the window and listens, the sleet tapping with the same patient, familiar hand. When the house has settled, Lily steps quietly from the room and closes the door with a practiced softness. The sound is a thin, satisfying click that fits into the rhythm of the lamp and the storm. She moves to bed, tucks the blanket up and lets sleep find her in its own patient manner. If you have chosen to dim your screen, let the dark hold you now. Allow the rain's staccato and the lamp's soft mechanical song to occupy the same space as your breath. If you keep a small glow, do so gently as a companion. Either way, let the day's simple acts, tea poured, seams stitched, prisms hung, unspool in your mind as quiet scenes to walk through, not to solve, but to inhabit. There is one small final thing to say, softly. If you would like more evenings like this, there is a playlist of similar nights waiting quietly in the space below. You might come back and sit with these small companies whenever you need the hushed domestic kindness of a lamp and a pot of tea. There is no hurry in the invitation, only the offer of more evenings to choose from. The lighthouse keeps its light. The repaired seam holds the memory of hands. The prisms scatter a patient, private aurora across the curve of the glass. Outside, Sea and storm continue in their immense, indifferent conversation. Inside, a small group have turned a minor fracture into a new, shared surface for light. Let the sound of sleet and hum be your companion now, and when you are ready, close your eyes and let the house's steady rhythms follow you into sleep.